You can catch Casey Joyner's work now in The Athletic and the Philadelphia Inquirer, where he's got a couple of articles this week on this Eagles and Falcons game, which we are going to dive into right now here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. My guy Casey Joyner is back for another season of One Thought on every game. Casey Joyner, what's going on, my friend? How you been?
Doing fantastic. Been looking forward to this all week.
Yes, we're all looking forward to football being back, and of course everybody's looking at One Thought every game from you to hear something on every single game and how to kind of take a look at it. But we got to start with, of course, what's going on here locally, as we like to try to do. Over in the Philadelphia Inquirer, you wrote one of your stories this week about the Eagles' rushing attack, and I've been waiting to talk about this because all offseason long, the theme has kind of been, look, this Eagles offensive line, it's pretty good if they can stay healthy. They are healthy. They've got to the week one. Brandon Brooks is going to play. Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks, Jason Kelsey, Isaac Seumalo, and Jordan Mailata. What does that mean for them against the Atlanta Falcons?
I'll tell you what it does. What it means is the Eagles last year. I have a metric called good blocking rate. We talked about it many times over the years. And good blocking rate measures how often you as an offense, give your ball carriers quality run blocking. The Eagles led the league in this category last year. Number one, despite having 14 offensive line changes, which is an NFL record for a 16-game season. 14 starting NFL line combinations, and they still go out and lead the league in good blocking rate, and they get everybody back. In fact, that article talks about, one of the things it talks about is Kelsey actually struggled some last year. He did not have the kind of year that he has had in past years, and Dallas Goedert actually didn't block quite as well as he has in past years. But not really bad, but when you looked at them compared to what they had in previous years, they weren't doing as well. I think Goedert going out for passes did it. I think Kelsey having to help out other people on the line because of so many injuries did it. So, and they've got arguably, Jeff Stoughton's one of the best coaches, best assistant coaches in team history. He might be the best offensive line coach in the league. So they've got the makings of a team that can run the football. We seem to talk about this every year. The Eagles have the makings of a good running attack. They've got the backs. They've got the line. Will they do it? Everything that they have personnel-wise says that they should, not only with the quarterback that they have, but the wide receivers that they have. I mean, everything points towards their being able to do that. Little concerned whether or not they can take care of that against Atlanta, though.
Right. Now, you wrote about it at the Inquirer, why the Eagles' rushing attack has the potentials to dominate. Should we expect more? I don't know what to expect from Nick Sirianni, but do we have any clues about how he might use Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Kenny Gainwell?
The thing is going into the year, we thought, okay, well, Ertz is done. He's not coming back. So, all right, well, now we're going to have Goddard be the tight end. Well, Ertz and Goddard are both back, which makes me think they saw Goddard wasn't blocking as well last year as he had in past years, and he had been a centerpiece of that blocking attack in past years. So I think what they may do, fantasy managers are going to tear their hair out if they pick Goddard the first down, or they pick Goddard as their tight end one, and this happens, but Goddard may end up blocking more this year, and Ertz may end up receiving more. If they do that sort of thing, and they've got, that's going to be something that's going to be a good sign for it that they're going to run the football if they go two tight end sets. What Sirianni says that he's more apt to do. It looked like for a while he was going to go three wide receiver sets, and you keep looking at the personnel going, why would you go three wide receiver sets with these guys? Why aren't you going two tight end sets? Sounds like he's going to go more two tight end sets. If he does, Miles Sanders was a top 10 back in the league last year in good blocking yards per attempt, which is how productive they are when you get good blocking. Really important because good blocking plays are 4 to 5 times more productive than bad blocking plays. So I think they've got the capacity to lean on him as a breakaway back. And Boston Scott, by the way, is one of the best change up pace backs in the league as well.
Casey Joyner is brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook inside Resorts Casino Hotel in Atlantic City. We'll get his betting pick on this Eagles-Falcons matchup a little bit later. He's writing that for the Philadelphia Inquirer. We'll tease you with that for a little bit down the road because the Eagles' wide receiver core, very young, very inexperienced. So how do they match up with a average Atlanta defensive backfield?
Yeah, it is an average Atlanta defensive backfield. I grade matchups on a scale of 1 to 100, with 100 being the most favorable, obviously 1 being the worst. 64 matchup points for Philadelphia this game in the passing game. So that's a solid number. It's not great, but it's a lot better than the 15 matchup points they have in the rushing game. I look at who they're going to be going up against. I mean, you've got Rager going up against a guy named Fabian Moreau. Is probably who he's going to face. Moreau is a green-rated cornerback. You've heard me talk about that every year. That means it's somebody that they should target in coverage. I think that's somebody they could go after. Nobody else in the secondary. Falcons don't have anybody who's red rated in the secondary as far as coverage wise. So, I mean, they could go after Morrow, and they could basically, if you don't have anybody red rated in the secondary, it means that you can basically call whatever you want and not have to worry too much about personnel. But I would not be surprised to see them funnel passes Morrow's way. But again, is Rager up to it? Kind of hit and miss last year, so I wouldn't try and funnel too much of the offense through him. But if I had to pick a receiver who's going to make a play, that would be where I'd go.
All right, if we flip things over to the Eagles on the defensive side of the ball, they've got a pretty good front four, even 5-6. You got Kerrigan, you've got Sweat, you've got Barnett, you've got Graham, you've got Hargrave, you've got Fletcher Cox. So how do they match up with the Falcons' offensive line?
It's going to be curious because they want to go with a different setup than they did in past years. But in the past, we always talked about how they were going to be, how they like to get up the field, and they like to get a lot of penetration with what they call in football one-gapping, where you're just taking one side of an offensive lineman and trying to get upfield and disrupt. The problem for the Eagles over the years is that, and we've talked about many times on the show, all that one-gapping is great when you get to the back, but if you don't get to the back, now everybody's upfield, and now you're having to rely on people coming back from the secondary to come up and make tackles. It's really a boom or bust kind of approach. So the Eagles will always do well in good blocking rate. How many times they actually one point of attack blocks, but they would do terrible in good blocking yards per attempt, meaning if you got them blocked, you were going to get big gains. Sounds like Jonathan Gannon's going to go. He won't get away from running one gap, but he's going to do a lot more two-gapping, which means the defensive linemen are going to try to occupy space, and it's supposed to buy the rest of your defense time to get up there and make tackles. So I think they probably won't have as good a good blocking rates as they have in the past, but they might not give up the big gainers. It'll make them a more consistent defense. I'm just curious to see where they're going to try and meet that in the middle, because I don't think he's going to pure two-gap. I don't think he's going to do that. He's going to do some hybrid stuff, but I'm very curious to see what they do, because I frankly don't want Fletcher Cox playing two-gap because he's such a good one-gap up-the-field player. I want him doing that. I think they will do that. So it's going to be interesting to see how Gannon plays things out this year, because I think they're going to be able to be more consistent run defense with this approach.
All right. I'm interested to see how you feel that the Eagles are going to match up secondary-wise against Calvin Ridley. We don't know what they're going to do with Kyle Pitts, but we would imagine he's going to be all over the field. So, Slay, they brought in Steven Nelson, how that kind of factors in. No McLeod this week. He is out. So you're going to Anthony Harris and probably Marcus Epps. Eric Wilson is in at linebacker. So that secondary linebacker matchup with Ridley and the unicorn, Kyle Pitts.
I hate seeing Kyle Pitts having to face. I mean, I would like to have seen the starter go up against him, because Pitts is – you say he's a unicorn. That's what he is. He's a wide receiver playing tight end. I mean, I don't think – I mean, they'll probably have some plays where he goes in line to – and he could block and such, because you can't just send him out as a receiver all the time. But they're going to get him out in coverage all the time. I like Nelson. Did quite well for the Steelers. He was consistent there. He's not a great corner, but he's a consistent corner. I like him there. I'm just afraid of that matchup with Pitts. Another thing I'll mention about the Atlanta running game, though, as to why they might want to throw the ball more. Last year, I mentioned the good blocking yards per attempt metric. Mike Davis finished last in the league among qualifying backs in good blocking yards per attempt. He's just not a breakaway guy. I wouldn't be surprised to see Cordero Patterson be able to get a lot of carries this week, or more carries than people would think. I don't think they'll necessarily go Davis to the bell cow, because he wore down as the season went along last year, and they're going to be worried about that this year. It's another reason to think they'll try and funnel a lot of their offense to Ridley and Pitts.
Casey Joyner, these two teams both won 4 games last year. So obviously they are struggling, or were struggling teams last season. Not a lot of high expectations for both of them this year. But what's the matchup difference in this one that could make this game go one way or another that you're looking at?
And the whole matchup I'm looking at is, can the Eagles run the ball against an Atlanta front seven? Again, I mentioned that they've got a strong front seven. I've got them as a red-rated run defense. It's only 15 matchup points for the Eagles in the running game. So can they do it, and will they do it? Because if they try to go pass heavy in this matchup and they try and say, okay, we're going to throw the ball out, we're going to try and do that approach, that's going to invite Atlanta to do the same thing. If they do that, they'll lose, because they do not have a good enough passing game to keep up with Atlanta's passing game. So I think the key to this matchup is, does Philadelphia run the ball like they should? And if they do, and they get as good a blocking as they're capable of getting, even with the tough matchup, then they've got a shot. But if they try and turn this into a passing fest, it's over.
All right, Casey Joyner, one thought every game. We'll get his pick on the Eagles and the Falcons coming up in just a little bit. But right now, let's take a look at one thought every single game in the NFL week number 1, which is the way he feels that the week 1 games will go. First off, we'll get your thoughts on last night's game, which was great. So, are the Cowboys for real? Tampa Bay the favorite? What's your takeaway from last night's game?
Takeaway from last night's game is it's only the fourth game in NFL history where both teams threw 50 or more times. I don't think that's what either of these teams are going to be as the season progresses. I think it's a week one matchup thing where both teams are saying, hey, we can't play defense that well because we haven't practiced defense. As they practice defense, it'll be different. But I think that bodes better for the Cowboys because they can't win just throwing the football. They've got to be a Zeke-heavy team. Last night was not what they want to be. It was what Tampa was.
Yeah, that obviously a lot of fun last night. That was a good way to kick off the whole season. And, of course, you heard the game right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, let's get into the week one slate of games. One thought, every game, Pittsburgh's going to Buffalo. Buffalo's a favorite to be a Super Bowl team this year. Pittsburgh's kind of in limbo. Could be the last season for Ben Roethlisberger.
I think it will be the last season for Roethlisberger. They realized last year we can't ask a quarterback of his age with a revamped elbow to throw the ball 40 times per game. It came down from the top that they want to run the ball more often, that the owner said we've got to be more of a power running team. We can't be like this. I think they're going to lean on Najee Harris a ton. But look, Tuitt's on IR. Watt missed the entire preseason, just signed the contract, but is he going to be what he was? You add this game to being in the home field in Buffalo, and I think the Bills are going to get this one.
All right, Minnesota had a down year last year. Can they rebound? They go to Cincinnati. Cincinnati, Burrow's coming off the ACL. They went out and got Jamar Chase, so their offensive line's still a mess there. Bengals at home, but Minnesota did not have a very good year last year. How's this one play out?
I think Mike Zimmer, last year was not Mike Zimmer football, and he said his defense played as bad as he had seen it play in his entire tenure in the NFL, not just in Minnesota, worst defense he'd ever coached. A lot of that was injuries, and he's going to do everything he can to protect that, which also means running the football. He's not going to put the ball in Kirk Cousins' hands any more than he absolutely has to. Cincinnati's rush defense gives Minnesota 90 matchup points. You add it to, I think, just an overall talent advantage for the Vikings. I'm taking them in that one.
All right, Casey Joyner is with us here. One thought every single game. Let's go to San Francisco, Detroit. I like San Francisco in the NFC West. Detroit, obviously, just coming off of multiple terrible seasons. New coaching staff, new look out there, new quarterback out there. San Francisco is a big road favorite in this one.
They are. I mean, this is the biggest mismatch of the week. The 49ers have a great pass defense. In fact, Detroit has the toughest passing game matchup on offense. And on defense, I mean, they give, I mentioned the matchup points total, they give San Francisco 100 matchup points in passing and rushing. DeAndre Swift's been battling a groin injury. I mean, you've got Trey Lance, you've got Kittle healthy, you've got Deebo Samuel healthy, you've got Trey Sermon back there. It just keeps going. San Francisco should win this game handily.
Handily, he says. All right, Arizona, Tennessee. This is like an underrated, sneaky good game because it's just not high-profile teams. I love Tennessee this year, although we'll see what their offense looks like without Arthur Smith. Arizona, this could be the final run for Cliff Kingsbury if their offense doesn't get going. So Arizona, Tennessee, in Tennessee this week. How's it go?
I think that it's going to be the Kingsbury system where he's going to want to throw the ball a lot versus Tennessee trying to slow it down. A lot of what we're going to probably see in Philly, Atlanta. And mind you, the Cardinals have 80 pass defense matchup points to lean on. Tennessee doesn't have a very good secondary. So I think that it's going to be that sort of system. I think the Cardinals are probably going to hit a lot of big plays, but you saw in the Thursday night game, it's really tough to play defense early on. And I'm just looking at the Cardinals going, can you guys tackle Derrick Henry in week one? And maybe if it's week 10, you might be able to, but you guys are just basically going to have been practicing tackling barely throughout the whole season. I think it's going to be a tough matchup for them. Add that to Tennessee being at home, I'll take Titans.
That's a very good point. These are fresh legs earlier in the season than they are later on in the year. Seattle, Indianapolis, it was announced today that Carson Wentz will start for the Colts. He has not played well against the Seahawks in the past. Seahawks have to travel, though, Indianapolis. This Indianapolis team's such a wild card because of Wentz. So do the Colts get the better of the Seahawks in week one?
Looking at the Seahawks last year, everybody keeps some fantasy football. Everybody was thinking, oh, DK Metcalf is going to be so great. And they keep talking about how great the Seattle passing game was last year. They forget that it was the first half they did great. And then they were giving up a ton of points, a ton of yards. And Pete Carroll said, we can't keep doing this because they lost 3 out of 4 at one point. And he said, we've got to go back to run game and defense because that's what I do. They did that late last year and they won 6 out of 7. That's, I think, why he and Wilson were butting heads. Wilson wanted to go back to throwing the football. And Carroll's like, look, it wasn't working. We were losing games and giving up 30 points a contest. So I think Seattle's going to go back to that sort of approach. I think Carson Wentz has the durability issues. They've got injuries at some of the skill position players. Their offensive line's a bit banged up. Indianapolis is. I think they'll be a better team down the road, but he's got to get under center, and they've got to get used to him being around him. Seattle has less of that sort of volatility, so I'll take the Seahawks.
All right, one thought every game. Casey Joyner, L.A. Chargers going to the Washington football team. Washington football team, new quarterback, defense very good. Chargers, new coach. A lot of people like them this year, so this is a very intriguing week one matchup.
It is. Washington's got one of the best defenses in the league. They were sixth in sacks and eighth in pass pressure rate last year per Pro Football Reference. They got ball hawks in their secondary. They were fifth in interception rate. They added Jamin Davis and William Jackson the third. It's going to be an even stronger platoon. I like the Chargers, but Eckler's banged up. They've got a new head coach, new offensive and defensive coordinators. They've got a cross-country trip with a 1 p.m. Eastern kickoff, and you're having to face the Washington defense. I'm just looking at it going, I don't like West Coast teams playing on the East unless there's some other factors to offset that. When you're facing this sort of defense, that's not an offset factor, so I'll take Washington.
All right, these two are the stinkers of the week. It's the Jets and Carolina, but at least a storyline here. Darnold against the Jets. Zach Wilson makes his debut. Carolina thinks they're better than people are giving them credit for. They didn't have McCaffrey for most of last season. Can they get a win at home against the Jets?
Yeah, stinker is a nice way to put it. It's not exactly a great matchup. The Jets, I like Robert Saleh, their coach. They've got question marks. They got a rookie quarterback. He only had one season in college, and that season was against one good season in college. That was against a slew of weak teams. They've got a three-headed committee at running back. They're not really sure who they want. Crowder's out. Elijah Moore has missed most of training camp due to injury. Davis is in his first game in the new offense. I go over to Carolina and go, okay, I know it's Darnold. Darnold's not great, but he's a solid quarterback. They've got McCaffrey. They've got Moore. They've got Anderson. They've got a lot of proven people around them. I'll take stability over the volatility of the Jets and take Carolina.
All right, Casey Joyner's with us. One thought every game. Let's go to, this is the worst game of the year, maybe. Jacksonville is taking on Houston. The Texans have all sorts of problems. Jacksonville at least has Lawrence and some stuff to watch here.
They do. I don't understand why they had Lawrence splitting snaps in the preseason with Gardner Minshew. I mean, it's great for the Eagles because Gardner Minshew got a lot of snaps and he's got some practice with another team, but still he got some reps and such. It helped them. It didn't help Lawrence get developed very well. So I don't like that. ATN is out. They've got a very inconsistent wide receiver group. They've got no pass catching talent tight end. They got one of the rushing defenses in the league. I mean, Houston's got Tyrod Taylor. They've got a talented group of running backs. Their coach knows I want to run the ball, and he's got that kind of a matchup. I mentioned in my athletic podcast this morning that I think this is a matchup that could actually score a lot of points, could hit the over in this contest. I like Houston just because it's at home and because they know what they want to be, and Jacksonville's got too many question marks.
By the way, again, you can see Casey Joyner stuff in the Philadelphia Inquirer. You can also listen and hear him and see his stuff in The Athletic this season. So check out Casey Joyner at The Athletic and his Eagles coverage at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Let's go to one thought every game, Cleveland, Kansas City. This might be one of the marquee matchups. You got the worst matchup of the season and maybe the best.
You could have the best matchup. Kevin Stefanski, he leads Cleveland to their best season since Bill Belichick. Offense has elite run blocking. They got Chubb and Hunt. By the way, I think Hunt is going to get a lot more carries this year because Chubb in his whole career, his career high-end touches is 237. I think they're realizing that to platoon. So it's going to truly be a two-headed rushing matchup this year. They almost beat the Chiefs in the divisional round last year, but Kansas City rebuilt their offensive line. They want to run the ball. They did it in 2019 in the stretch run. They became not a run-centric offense, but they ran the ball a lot more than people give them credit for. So I think they're going to be able to do that. It's going to be a slugfest in both teams trying to run the ball. But look, Cleveland might not have OBJ. The Chiefs are going to have Mahomes. They're going to have Hill. They're going to have Kelsey. And I just don't think that the Cleveland's going to be able to match that big playability. I think it's going to be close, but I'm going to take Kansas City because of that and being at home.
That game will be on 97.3 ESPN after the Eagles and the Falcons. We'll pick that game up in progress. Miami and New England rookie quarterback, but their defense is much different than last year. They got a lot of guys back because of COVID. Miami was a hot team last year. It's funny. You have the young quarterback, and then after like 1 or 2 years, you're kind of like, that guy's no longer any good. I'm ready to move on to the next guy. So Miami, what's the read? Miami versus New England.
I want to pull the upset in this one. I want to say that Miami can do it. I think they can because Brian Flores, they won over New England late last year. He put one of the best defensive game plans of the year together against Kansas City in Week 14. Made the Patrick Mahomes quite confused during most of that contest. And he's had plenty of time to formulate tactics to confuse Mac Jones in his first start. Having said all this, to a Tagovailoa, it's Tagovailoa. I learned that this offseason. He's still a work in progress. The Dolphins have the worst passing game matchups total in Week 1. And also, Miami's only won once in New England since 2009, and Belichick has had just as much time to put together a dominant game plan to offset Flores. So I'm going to take New England to this one by a small amount.
All right, this one's pretty good. It changed a little bit this year, but Winston's now a quarterback, not Drew Brees. People seem to be down on the Saints. They're actually a quote-unquote home dog here. The game's being played in Jacksonville. But Green Bay, is this the Aaron Rodgers, I'm going to go out with a bang tour?
I'm thinking it probably is. And you look at, I mean, he's got that aggressive approach. I don't think Sean Payton's going to be able to coach him out of interceptions because, frankly, a lot of good coaches have had Jameis Winston, and none of them were able to do it. And as good as Payton is, I think that's just who Jameis Winston is. You accept the interceptions, the big plays. I mean, the Saints have Marquez Callaway, so he looks like he's going to be a good receiver, but he's got Jair Alexander in his first matchup, and he's only done it in the preseason, so I'm not really sold on him. If he can't do it, they got Deontay Harris, Traquan Smith, Adam Troutman. You're going to have those guys trying to keep up with Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams, Robert Tonyan. I just don't see it. If it was in New Orleans, it might be a little bit closer, but I really like Green Bay in this one because I just don't think the Saints are going to be able to keep up with the Green Bay's firepower.
Green Bay's favored by 4.5 on that one. Home dog here, the New York Giants at home against Denver. A lot of people like Denver's roster. They're not so happy with their quarterback situation. It's Teddy Bridgewater and Daniel Jones. I'll take Bridgewater over Jones, by the way.
I would too. And Bridgewater he passed all the Parcells rules coming out of college. We talked about that in past years where that's a really good indicator for being a great quarterback. He's not a great quarterback, but he's a good quarterback, does a lot of things well, and you know what you're going to get out of him, and they weren't sure what they're going to get out of Drew Lock. But, I mean, look at the Giants, disastrous preseason, terrible offensive line last year, might be worse this year. Ingram's out. Barkley, he's probably going to play. In fact, almost certain he'll play, but is he going to play the full game? Does he have any injury? Does he have any injury rust? Galladay is set to play, but again, same thing. He's barely been on the field in training camp. Kadarius Toney's been in an awful training camp. Is he going to be able to make an impact? I keep looking at these things, and I look at the Broncos defense. They stockpiled some people on defense. Fangio's got a good defense to lean on, and he's got a percentage offense. So even though it's a cross-country trip for Denver, I'm going to take him.
All right, a couple more to go here with Casey Joyner. One thought, every game, including Sunday Night Football right here on 97.3 ESPN. Bears and Rams. Rams, I like a lot. Bears, scratching my head.
Yeah, in Chicago, I mean, they've got it's a brutally tough run defense matchup for them. They need Montgomery to be their guy, and it's going to be tough for them to do that. Sean McVay's continually talked about how Matthew Stafford can get every receiver eligible, how he talks about him being a peer versus having the teacher-student relationship with Goff. I mean, it says that their offense can do a whole lot more. I'm thinking that Stafford could actually lead the league in touchdowns this year if things go well. The Bears' pass defense is nowhere near what it used to be. They've got some injuries back there. I don't see Andy Dalton and that receiving core being able to keep up with that. So I'm taking the Rams pretty handily.
Oh, Rams pretty handily on Sunday night. And then Monday night, no more double dipper. It's just one Monday nighter. It's Baltimore and Vegas. And Baltimore had a rough day at the office yesterday. Lost Gus Edwards, Ed Marcus Peters. Vegas is a team that seems to have 9-8, 8-9 written all over it.
They do, and it's Vegas. It's at home. They're going to be with their home crowd for the first time at that stadium. It's a beautiful stadium. I went up there last January when they were getting it done. I was in Vegas, and you see it from a distance. It's just this gleaming onyx jewel in the middle of the desert. But I mean, Baltimore. Look, they lost Dobbins, they lost Hill, they lost Edwards, but they still can run block. And Tyson Williams looked real good in the preseason, and they're arguably the best run blocking team. They didn't lead the league in good blocking rate last year, but there's another metric of a good blocking productivity that they did lead the league. A downhill running like they do, again, you don't need really smart backs to do it. You need guys just going to go straight up the field. I think they'll have that. Don't know if they'll play Le'Veon Bell or not, but he could get some carries in there too. The Raiders have an awful rush defense too, and I just think that they're not going to be able to stop the Baltimore ground attack, even if Baltimore is playing backup. So I'm still taking Ravens.
All right, Casey Joyner from The Athletic here at KC Joyner TFS on Twitter. You can check out all his stuff at The Athletic and the Philadelphia Inquirer, where he's got his Week 1 Eagles-Falcons betting guide. So kind of tell us how to bet this game and what you think it's going to look like on Sunday.
Kind of leave some of it for readers of the Inquirer, but in talking about this contest, I'm looking at the spread of the game at the time of this writing was 3.5 points for the Falcons. And I just keep looking at this going, okay, they've got so much more big play talent on offense, and I think the Eagles are going to do the same thing as them past years. They're going to fight who they are personnel-wise. They're not going to go ahead and say we're going to lean on the ground game. Maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, that's what I'm leaning towards that happening. And I just see the big playability of the Atlanta receivers and the Atlanta passing game. Even Russell Gage is a pretty underrated receiver from the number 3 target on that offense. I'm looking at those, and I just don't see the Eagles being able to match up. So I've got the Falcons winning this one and covering.
All right, he likes the Falcons to win and cover that 3.5 spread. Casey Joyner from The Athletic. One thought, every game in the books. He'll be back on Monday with one thought on every game after it's been played. We'll have that on Monday's show at 5 o'clock. And, of course, right here on the Sports Bash, Casey Joyner with one thought on every game on our Happy Hour Friday show. It's good to have you back, man.
Great to be back. I've been looking forward to this all offseason.